The twin sons of Krylon beat down harshly on the training grounds. Dust swirled in the air as the sound of heavy footsteps echoed across the field. Commander Lyra stood tall at the edge, her arms crossed, eyes scanning the group of cadets lined up before her. The Krylonians were proud warriors, muscular and fast, each movement sharp and precise. Today they were to train with a new recruit, a human from a distant, tiny planet called Earth. Lyra's lips curved into a small, almost invisible smirk. Humans were known in the galaxy as weak, fragile, and slow. She had fought many alien races, and she knew her species' strength surpassed almost every world. But humans? She had no doubt she would see it herself today. "Line up!" Lyra's voice rang out. It was firm, commanding, and impossible to ignore. The cadets shifted into formation, their heavy boots pressing into the metal ground. At the very end of the line stood Ethan, a human barely taller than some of the Krylonian cadets. His frame was slim, his movements slightly awkward. He looked nervous, his brown eyes scanning the towering warriors around him. He did not yet know the challenges he would face, but he had traveled light years from Earth to prove something to himself, and maybe to the galaxy. Lyra's gaze landed on him. "This is him?" she asked aloud, more to herself than anyone else. One of her fellow commanders shrugged. "Yes. He is the one sent by Earth. He claims he wants to join the ranks." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Earth? Weak planet, weak people. This will be interesting." The training began with basic exercises. Krylonians leapt across walls, carried heavy boulders, and ran laps that would exhaust a human in minutes. Ethan struggled to keep pace. His lungs burned, his legs shook, and sweat ran down his forehead, yet he did not stop. He knew brute strength alone would never be enough against warriors like these. Lyra watched with a growing sense of superiority. "He cannot even lift that stone," she muttered, as Ethan struggled to push a boulder that was easily lifted by the other cadets. A soft chuckle came from one of the younger cadets. "Commander, maybe he should go back to his planet." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Watch him. Do not underestimate. But yes, I doubt he will last long." Ethan, however, observed carefully. While he could not match their speed or power, he noticed patterns. How the cadets moved, how they attacked, how they sometimes left small openings in their defenses. Where others relied purely on strength, he relied on his mind. He began learning their techniques quietly, analyzing each motion, and thinking of ways to use their strengths against them. During a sparring session, Lyra paired him against Zarak, one of her best fighters. Zarak's strikes were fast, each one capable of knocking Ethan off his feet. Ethan barely dodged, rolling and stumbling across the ground. Lyra watched, arms crossed, a smirk still on her lips. "Hopeless," she whispered. "He will never survive here." But Ethan did not give up. He observed Zarak's rhythm and adjusted his movements. When Zarak expected a dodge to the left, Ethan would go right. When Zarak tried to strike high, Ethan ducked and grabbed a loose pole nearby to swing himself out of reach. It was not skill in strength, but skill in observation. Slowly, he began to turn the fight into a game of strategy rather than raw force. Lyra frowned. Something about his movements was unusual. She had trained hundreds of cadets over her life, yet she had never seen anyone react like this. "Curious," she muttered, but she would not admit it yet. Humans were still weak. She reminded herself of that fact. During lunch, Ethan sat quietly at the edge of the training hall. He ate little, observing the cadets. They boasted and laughed loudly, showing off their strength. Lyra walked past him, noticing his calm demeanor. "You are quiet," she said. "Why do you not speak like the others?" Ethan looked up. "I prefer to observe first," he said simply. "Then I learn." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Learn? From them? They are strong. You are fragile. How can you learn anything useful? Ethan smiled faintly. Strength is not always about muscles. Lyra almost laughed, but the tone of his voice carried a quiet confidence that made her pause. She shook her head. We shall see, she said, moving on. The afternoon brought obstacle courses. Cadets climbed walls, crossed chasms, and balanced on narrow beams suspended high above the ground. Ethan struggled at first, nearly falling several times. Lyra was ready to step in and scold him, but he caught himself, using clever adjustments and careful timing to move forward. He did not rely on speed or power, he relied on logic and patience. One obstacle involved a swinging log suspended over a pit of spikes. Krylonians leapt over it effortlessly, landing in perfect stance. Ethan studied the rhythm of the swing. When the log came back, he timed his jump perfectly, grabbing the log and swinging himself forward. He fell into the pit, barely missing the spikes, but managed to pull himself out and finish the course. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. It was not a graceful finish, but it was effective. He had survived what most would consider a death trap. Interesting, she muttered under her breath. He does not give up, and he thinks differently. As the sun began to set over Krylon, the cadets gathered for a final drill, combat simulations. Holographic enemies appeared, and the cadets were tasked with neutralizing them. The simulations were designed to test both speed and power. Ethan moved slowly at first, dodging and weaving, then began using the environment. He knocked over crates to create barriers, tripped enemies with ropes, and led groups into confined spaces where brute strength became useless. Lyra watched in silence. She could not deny it. He was clever. Every move he made was carefully calculated. Even though he was physically weaker than the cadets, he had a kind of strength that came from thought, not muscle. As the drill ended, the cadets looked exhausted but exhilarated. Ethan was still standing, breathing hard, but smiling faintly. Lyra approached him. You survived, she said slowly. But do not think this changes anything. Krylonians are strong. You are human. You are fragile. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow. Maybe, he said, but strength is not just about muscles. It is about surviving, adapting, and learning. Lyra stared at him, intrigued but unwilling to admit it fully. She had underestimated him. She could feel it, though she would not say so aloud. Humans were different, small, fragile, weak. And yet, somehow, Ethan had survived where she expected him to fail. As night fell on Krylon, the training grounds emptied. Ethan lay on a cot in the barracks, thinking. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. The Krylonians would judge him, push him, and perhaps even try to defeat him with strength alone. But he had learned something vital today. Humans had a different kind of power, and with that power, he could survive. Lyra, meanwhile, returned to her quarters. She could not stop thinking about the human. There was something unusual about him, something she could not yet name. He had survived, adapted, and even impressed her without showing the slightest sign of physical strength. She frowned. This human, maybe he is not as weak as I thought, she whispered to herself. And so, under the twin moons of Krylon, a new chapter began. Lyra's assumptions were challenged, and Ethan's journey had only just begun. Neither of them knew the trials ahead, but one thing was certain. The galaxy was bigger and stranger than they had imagined, and the true strength of a human was about to reveal itself. The morning sun rose over Krylon, casting long shadows across the training grounds. The air was still, almost eerily quiet. Cadets were already moving through their exercises, their muscles flexing, their feet pounding against the ground. Commander Lyra strode among them, eyes sharp and calculating. She had spent the night thinking about Ethan, the human who had survived the previous day's brutal training. "Do not underestimate him," one of her fellow commanders had warned. "Humans are weak, yes, but sometimes their minds work in strange ways." Lyra had scoffed. Weak is weak. No amount of cleverness will save him in real combat. But she could not shake the uneasy feeling. There was something different about him, something she did not yet understand. The quiet of the morning was broken by a sudden, loud alarm. Red lights flashed across the training grounds, and a siren wailed. "Alert! Alert! Containment breach! Sector 5! Lyra's eyes narrowed. "What happened?" she demanded. A cadet ran up, panting. "A predator. It escaped from the containment zone. It's heading toward the camp." Lyra's jaw tightened. "Everyone to defensive positions. Move!" The cadets rushed into formation, weapons ready. The air was filled with tension. They had trained for such scenarios, but nothing could prepare them for the size and speed of the predator they were about to face. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. The Krylonians were relying on raw strength and instinct. That would not be enough. He had to think differently. The predator emerged from the trees, a massive creature with scales like metal, claws sharper than any blade, and eyes that burned like molten fire. It roared, shaking the ground beneath its feet. The Krylonians charged immediately, swords raised, ready to strike. Lyra was at the forefront, her twin blades flashing in the sun as she aimed for the creature's head. Cadets followed, striking with full force. The predator swiped at them effortlessly, sending several flying. Its sheer power was terrifying. Ethan stayed back, observing. He noticed the pattern of the predator's movements. It lunged left, then right, then paused for a moment before striking again. The Krylonians attacked with brute force, but their movements were predictable. If he could manipulate the battlefield, he might be able to trap it. He ran to a nearby supply area, grabbing ropes, metal rods, and crates. Quickly, he set up a series of traps, weaving ropes across the clearing and positioning crates to limit the predator's movements. He shouted to a few cadets, "Move here! Draw it toward the ropes!" Lyra saw him out of the corner of her eye. "What is that human doing?" she barked. "Step back before you get crushed!" Ethan did not step back. "Trust me," he called. The predator lunged again. This time, Ethan's setup worked. The ropes tangled its legs, slowing it down. The crates forced it into a confined space, where its massive size became a disadvantage. Lyra and the cadets attacked from behind, striking with precise blows while the predator struggled against the trap. Lyra's eyes widened in surprise. The human, he had done it. He had turned the battlefield into a trap using only his mind and a few simple tools. The predator, which would have destroyed them all if left unchecked, roared one final time before collapsing, restrained and subdued. The cadets cheered, some laughing with relief, others staring at Ethan in astonishment. Lyra stood silently, processing what she had just witnessed. She had expected him to run, to panic, maybe even to get hurt, but instead, he had saved the group. When the danger had passed, Lyra approached him, her expression unreadable. "You survived that," she said, her voice low. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. "It was a matter of observation and planning," he replied. "Strength alone would not have worked." Lyra shook her head slowly. "I underestimated you. I thought humans were weak." Ethan smiled faintly. "We are different, yes. But weak? Not always." Lyra frowned. She had fought countless enemies, conquered countless worlds, and yet here was a human, small and seemingly fragile, outsmarting a beast that would have destroyed her warriors. "Different, yes. But do not think this makes you one of us," she said. Ethan nodded. "I do not want to be one of you. I want to survive, to learn, and to prove that Earth can produce strength in ways you do not expect." Lyra studied him. There was something in his eyes, a quiet confidence, a spark that refused to be extinguished. He did not boast, he did not fight for glory, but he adapted and survived. That was a kind of strength the Krylonians often overlooked. As the cadets regrouped, one of them approached Lyra. "Commander, should we train him differently now? He seems unusual." Lyra considered this carefully. "Yes, we will observe him closely. Strength comes in many forms. Perhaps there is something humans have that we do not fully understand." Ethan spent the rest of the day with the cadets, helping repair equipment and assisting in drills. Some of the Krylonians watched him skeptically, still thinking him weak. Others were quietly impressed by his calm under pressure and his ability to think clearly in dangerous situations. During a break, Lyra finally spoke to him privately. "You saved lives today, not with strength, but with strategy." Ethan nodded. "It is not just about fighting, it is about thinking, predicting, and using what is available. That is how humans survive." Lyra frowned. "Humans survive? We Krylonians are the strongest. No human could stand against a predator like that and live." Ethan's eyes were steady. "I survived because I used my mind. Strength alone is not enough in the galaxy. You will see it more often than you think." Lyra could not argue with that. She had spent her life relying on raw power, training cadets to fight harder, faster, stronger. And yet, the human had outperformed many of them without a single strike that matched their strength. That evening, the cadets gathered for a debrief. Lyra addressed them, her tone sharp but thoughtful. "Today we faced a threat no one expected. The predator was powerful, but our weakness was not strength. It was imagination. Learn from this. Strength alone does not guarantee victory. Strategy, observation, and adaptation are just as important." All eyes turned to Ethan. Some stared with respect, others with confusion. Lyra continued, "And human, Ethan, you have shown us that even those we underestimate can teach us valuable lessons. Remember this, never judge by size alone. The galaxy is full of surprises." Ethan felt a small swell of pride, though he did not boast. He had survived the first real test, and he had done it without needing to match the Krylonians blow for blow. His mind had been his greatest weapon. That night, as the camp quieted down, Ethan lay under the twin moons of Krylon, reflecting on the day's events. He knew the path ahead would not be easy. The Krylonians were strong, proud, and sometimes arrogant. They expected power to come in one form, raw physical strength. But Ethan had already shown that humans were different. They survived by thinking, by adapting, and by seeing opportunities others missed. The galaxy might underestimate them, but he would prove that Earth had more to offer than anyone expected. Meanwhile, Lyra stared out from her quarters, unable to stop thinking about the human. He was clever, resourceful, and fearless in ways that most Krylonians were not. He had survived a test that would have killed many. Perhaps, just perhaps, humans were stronger than she had ever believed. The night wind swept across Krylon, carrying with it the distant sounds of alien wildlife and the faint hum of the camp's energy shields. Somewhere, a small human from Earth was learning the ways of the galaxy, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. And somewhere, a proud Krylonian commander was beginning to question everything she thought she knew about strength. The first test of strength was over, but for Ethan and Lyra, it was only the beginning. The morning light on Krylon was pale and sharp, cutting across the jagged mountains surrounding the training grounds. Commander Lyra moved swiftly through the camp, her twin blades strapped across her back, her mind restless. Ever since the Predator incident, she could not shake the thought of the human, Ethan, small, fragile, and yet capable of feats that should have been impossible for someone like him. The cadets were buzzing with excitement about yesterday's events. Some of them still talked in whispers, impressed by Ethan's strategy and quick thinking. Many, however, still doubted his worth. Humans, they said, were weak. But Lyra had begun to see cracks in that assumption. Ethan walked calmly across the training field, carrying a small pack with supplies. Unlike the cadets, he did not rush or strain his body unnecessarily. Every step he took was measured, precise, controlled. He had learned quickly that exhaustion was an enemy, and careful planning could overcome brute strength. Lyra stopped him as he passed near the weapons racks. "Human," she said, her voice sharp but curious. Ethan looked up. "Commander?" "I want to know about your world," Lyra said. She studied him closely, trying to read his expression. "Earth. You say it is small, weak, and yet somehow it has produced someone capable of surviving here." Ethan nodded. "Earth is small compared to Krylon. Our people are not strong in the way your cadets are, but we survive by thinking, by learning from our mistakes, and by working together. We do not rely solely on muscle or speed." Lyra's brow furrowed. "Thinking? That is an unusual form of strength. And teamwork? Krylonians are warriors. We fight alone. Relying on others is often a weakness." Ethan smiled faintly. "Sometimes it is a weakness to fight alone. Survival is not always about being the strongest. It is about being the smartest, the quickest to adapt, and the calmest under pressure. That is why I survived the Predator." Lyra considered this silently. He spoke with confidence, yet without arrogance. It was different from the Krylonians she had trained. He had faced danger and survived not because of sheer strength, but because of intelligence and strategy. "I see," she said finally. "Perhaps I underestimated your kind." Ethan inclined his head. "You did. But now you know. Strength is not only about muscle." Lyra's hands tightened around the straps of her blades. She had an idea forming, one she could not ignore. "If you are truly capable, then you will face me, one-on-one, a duel, to test your abilities." Ethan's eyes widened slightly, but he did not hesitate. "A duel?" he asked. "Yes. If you are as clever as you claim, you will not need brute strength to survive it." Lyra's tone was calm, but there was a challenge in it that made the cadets gather around, whispering in excitement. A human against a Krylonian commander. The stakes were clear. The duel was arranged in the largest arena of the training grounds. The floor was a mixture of sand and stone, uneven, with obstacles scattered across the space. The cadets lined the perimeter, eager to watch. Lyra stepped forward first, her stance confident, her eyes locked on Ethan. "Do not underestimate me, human. This is not a game." Ethan nodded. "I do not underestimate you. But I have learned something valuable. Strength comes in many forms." Lyra lunged first, her blades flashing with speed and precision. Ethan barely moved, dodging just enough to avoid the strikes. He stumbled once, then recovered, analyzing her movements carefully. Each attack she made followed a rhythm, a pattern he could anticipate. "Interesting," Lyra muttered. "He adapts quickly." Ethan did not strike back with force. Instead, he used his surroundings. A rock here, a loose plank there. He moved with balance and precision, using obstacles to block, redirect, or slow her attacks. Every step was calculated, every dodge deliberate. He was not strong like the Krylonians, but he was smart, and that made him dangerous. The cadets gasped as Ethan anticipated one of Lyra's lunges and sidestepped at the last moment, using a fallen beam to vault over her and land behind her. Lyra spun to counter, but Ethan was already moving again, predicting her next strike before it came. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "This is unusual. Humans are small, fragile, but he thinks too fast, Adapts too well. Ethan's breathing was steady. He did not rush. He waited for openings, observing her rhythm, noting moments of hesitation. Then, when the moment came, he used a small trick, a fake move that drew her forward just enough for him to sidestep and gently push her off balance. Not enough to harm her, but enough to make her stumble. The cadets erupted in murmurs. Lyra regained her balance immediately, a small smile forming despite herself. "Clever," she said softly. Ethan bowed slightly, acknowledging the move. "Thank you. I have studied your movements. I can anticipate them, but I would never attempt to overpower you." Lyra paused, studying him. He was not trying to fight with strength, yet he was holding his own. So this is what Earth produces. Not brute power, but intelligence, adaptability, calmness. That is impressive. The duel continued, each movement a combination of speed, strategy, and foresight. Lyra realized that her assumptions about humans were entirely wrong. They were small, yes, and physically weaker, but their minds were sharp, and their ability to adapt to challenges was remarkable. By the end of the duel, Lyra lowered her blades, breathing lightly but smiling. "Enough," she said. The cadets looked on in awe. A human had faced their commander and survived every move without using strength like the Krylonians. Ethan approached her, still calm and composed. "I am grateful for the challenge. You taught me much today, just as I hope I taught you something in return." Lyra studied him closely. "Yes, you have shown me that humans are not as weak as I thought. Perhaps, in some ways, they are stronger than we are, in ways we do not yet understand." Ethan nodded. "Strength is not always physical. Humans endure, adapt, and survive in ways that may surprise even the strongest warriors." The cadets whispered among themselves, watching the exchange. Lyra turned to address them. "Take note. Strength is more than muscle. Strategy, intelligence, and adaptability are just as important. And humans, small though they may be, can possess these qualities in abundance." Later, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Lyra and Ethan walked across the training grounds. The air was quiet, the sky painted with reds and purples. Lyra finally spoke again, her tone softer. "You come from a small, weak planet, and yet you have survived predators, challenges, and even me. How can your people accomplish so much with so little?" Ethan's gaze was steady. "Earth is not weak. We have learned to survive because we do not rely on strength alone. We observe, plan, and adapt. Every challenge teaches us something new. That is how we endure. That is how we thrive." Lyra considered this. She had always believed that strength meant victory, that the strongest and fastest always prevailed. But Ethan had shown her a different truth. Humans could survive in ways the Krylonians often ignored. They could turn weakness into strength, danger into opportunity. "You have much to teach," she said finally. "Perhaps we have much to learn from you as well." Ethan smiled faintly. "And I have much to learn from you. Krylon is a different world, but the principles are the same: observation, patience, and adaptation." As the night fell and the twin moons rose over the mountains, a quiet understanding formed between them. Commander Lyra, proud and strong, had learned to see humans in a new light. And Ethan, small but clever, had proven that Earth had more to offer the galaxy than anyone had expected. The first duel had ended, but the journey was only beginning. A new respect had formed, and the seeds of partnership were planted. Together, they would face challenges far greater than any predator or obstacle, and together they would show that true strength often came from unexpected places. The stars twinkled above Krylon, silent witnesses to a human's resilience and a Krylonian's growing respect. Somewhere, far beyond the mountains and forests, the galaxy watched, and perhaps, for the first time, took note of Earth's hidden potential. The duel was over, but the adventure had just begun. The next morning on Krylon was filled with tension. A strange silence had settled over the camp, broken only by the occasional whisper of cadets practicing drills. Commander Lyra walked along the perimeter, her eyes scanning the horizon. She had spent the night thinking about Ethan, the human who had survived not only the Predator, but also her duel. She could not deny it. He was clever, resourceful, and far more capable than any Krylonian had expected. Suddenly, the camp's alarms blared loudly. Red lights flashed, illuminating the mountains around the training ground. The cadets froze for a moment and then ran to their stations. Lyra's jaw tightened as she caught the first reports. "Space raiders approaching," a scout shouted. "They are attacking the outer colonies. Reports indicate heavy ships armed with plasma cannons and boarding squads." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Everyone, to battle positions. Shields online. Weapons ready." The Krylonians moved with precision and confidence. They had trained for raids before, and their strength was unmatched. Ethan, standing beside Lyra, studied the reports with calm precision. "They will attack in waves," he said. "The first strike will be strong, but if we anticipate their patterns, we can counter them." Lyra glanced at him. "You are calm. Most humans would panic in the face of this threat." Ethan shook his head. "Panic wastes energy. Planning and observation save lives." Lyra nodded slowly. She was beginning to respect his wisdom. "Then plan quickly. We do not have much time." Ethan moved toward the cadets, speaking calmly and clearly. "The raiders will split into squads. Some will attack the gates, some will board the main building, and some will try to bypass defenses entirely. We must use our strengths efficiently. Krylonians are strong, fast, and fearless. Use that to your advantage. But think strategically. Do not just fight. They will adapt if we act predictably." The cadets listened carefully. Some were skeptical, but many had begun to trust him after seeing his previous actions. Lyra, standing nearby, observed silently. She could see the humans' different kind of strategy beginning to guide the Krylonians. The first wave of raiders approached swiftly, their ships hovering above the outer colonies, plasma cannons lighting up the sky. The Krylonians charged, weapons blazing, their strength and speed overwhelming many of the raiders' ground troops. But Ethan had planned for this. He positioned squads strategically, creating choke points where the raiders' numbers became a disadvantage. Krylonians blocked the narrow corridors, while humans and humans-influenced strategies guided weaker cadets to protect key areas. A raider struck hard at the main gate, its plasma weapon slicing the metal doors. Lyra was ready, but she hesitated as Ethan shouted instructions. "Push the barricade to the left! Force them into the side corridor!" The raiders stumbled, disoriented by the humans' clever strategy. Krylonians took advantage, striking quickly and decisively. Lyra's blades moved faster than ever, cutting down enemies that tried to advance. But Ethan did not fight with swords or raw power. He moved among the cadets, directing movements, repositioning defenses, and using small objects in the environment to slow down attackers. Lyra could not believe it. The human, small and seemingly weak, was controlling the flow of battle with precision. Every cadet, every maneuver, was part of his strategy. The raiders, confident in their strength, began to falter. During a critical moment, a squad of raiders tried to flank from the east. Lyra spotted them immediately and rushed forward, ready to engage. But Ethan quickly intercepted her. "Wait! Lead them to the traps I set near the storage area. It will delay them." Lyra hesitated for just a second, long enough to doubt, but not long enough to question him completely. She followed his instructions. The raiders charged into the trap, tangling themselves in ropes and equipment, slowing their advance. Lyra's cadets quickly struck, taking advantage of the confusion. The tide of the battle began to shift. Where Krylonians relied solely on strength, Ethan relied on observation, prediction, and planning. The combination of human strategy and Krylonian power was unstoppable. As the battle raged on, Lyra fought beside him, now seeing him not as a weak human, but as a valuable ally. "Your strategy works," she shouted over the noise. "You are impressive." Ethan nodded without stopping. "We are strongest when we work together, not when we fight alone." For hours, they battled the raiders, each move perfectly coordinated. Cadets who had doubted Ethan's abilities now followed his instructions without hesitation. The raiders, confused and disoriented, could not adapt to the combined tactics of human intelligence and Krylonian might. Finally, the last squad of raiders was cornered in the canyon near the outer walls. Lyra raised her blades, ready to strike the final blow, while Ethan calmly signaled to the cadets. With a coordinated effort, they forced the raiders to surrender, ending the attack. The battlefield fell silent. Smoke rose from the outer gates, and the injured were tended to. The Krylonians looked at Ethan with awe and newfound respect. Even Lyra, proud and strong as ever, could not hide her admiration. "You have done something remarkable," she said, approaching him. Her expression was serious, yet there was a spark of acknowledgement. "Humans are not as weak as I thought. Perhaps even stronger in ways we cannot measure." Ethan shook his head. "Strength is not only about fighting. It is about surviving, planning, and protecting those who rely on you. Today we all work together, and that is why we won." Lyra studied him, then nodded. "Yes, today humans have shown us that survival is more than just power. I misjudged you before. Now I see the truth." The cadets cheered, some clapping, some simply staring in amazement. Ethan had not only survived the battle, but he had also saved countless lives through his clever strategy and calm thinking. Even the youngest cadets, who had doubted him at first, now looked up to him as an example of courage and intelligence. Later that evening, Lyra and Ethan stood on a cliff overlooking the colony. The fires of the destroyed raider ships had been extinguished, and the stars began to shine above the mountains. The air was quiet, almost peaceful after the chaos of the day. "You were amazing today," Lyra said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "I thought humans were weak, fragile, incapable of facing what we face daily. But you have proven me wrong." Ethan looked at her, his expression calm. "I did not do it alone. Strength is not just physical. Today, Krylonians and humans worked together, and that is how we survived. Your strength and my strategy, together, we were unstoppable." Lyra nodded slowly. She had spent her life believing in raw power, in the might of the strongest. But today, she had learned a different truth. Humans were underestimated across the galaxy, dismissed as weak. But the combination of intelligence, adaptability, and courage could overcome even the fiercest foes. "Perhaps we should train differently," she said thoughtfully. "Combine human tactics with Krylonian strength. If we do this, the colonies will be safer than ever before." Ethan smiled faintly. "I would be honored to help. We can learn from each other." As the moons rose over Krylon, casting silver light across the mountains, a sense of calm settled over the camp. The battle had been won, but more importantly, respect had been earned. Humans, small and underestimated, had proven their worth. Krylonians had learned that strength came in many forms, not only in muscle and speed, but in mind, strategy, and the courage to act under pressure. Lyra turned to Ethan once more. "Today, you have changed how I see your kind. Earth is not weak. Your people have something we Krylonians rarely see: resilience, creativity, and the ability to survive against impossible odds." Ethan nodded. "And your people, Lyra, are strong in ways we could never achieve alone. Today proves that together, humans and Krylonians can accomplish what neither could do by themselves." They stood in silence, the twin moons reflecting in their eyes. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and opportunities, but if humans and Krylonians worked together, there was little they could not face. And in that moment, Commander Lyra knew that she had witnessed something rare, a human, small and underestimated, becoming a symbol of ingenuity and courage in a world built for strength. The first true test of alliance, she realized, was not just surviving. It was learning to respect the power hidden in the mind, the courage of the heart, and the resilience of a species the galaxy had long dismissed. The night was quiet, but the stars above Krylon shone brighter than ever. A new chapter had begun, a chapter in which humans and Krylonians would stand together against the threats of the galaxy, each learning from the other, each stronger for it. The Raiders had been defeated, but the galaxy held many more challenges. And together, Lyra and Ethan were ready. The sun rose slowly over Krylon, bathing the mountains in golden light. The training grounds were quiet, almost peaceful after the chaos of the recent raid. Commander Lyra walked among the cadets, observing their movements, their strength, and their growing confidence. The battle against the Raiders had been won, but its lessons lingered in everyone's mind. Humans, small and underestimated, had played a crucial role in the victory. Lyra's eyes found Ethan standing near the edge of the field, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The cadets moved around him, practicing techniques he had taught them, blending Krylonian strength with human strategy. Some of the younger cadets looked up at him with admiration, seeing in him a mind that could solve problems where brute force alone would fail. Lyra approached him, her steps quiet but deliberate. She had spent days reflecting on everything he had done, the Predator, the duel, and now the battle against the Raiders. Each moment had challenged her assumptions about humans. "You have proven much," she said, her voice steady but filled with a newfound respect. "I judged you wrongly before. I thought humans were weak. I see now, you are strong, in ways we Krylonians often forget to value." Ethan turned to her, his calm brown eyes meeting hers. "Strength comes in many forms," he said simply. "Humans survive because we adapt, observe, and plan, and we learn quickly from others. Today, Krylonians and humans work together, and that is why we succeeded." Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, you have taught me that strength is more than muscle. It is courage, intelligence, and the willingness to keep going when all seems lost." The cadets, hearing this, looked between them in awe. They had trained under the guidance of humans before, but never had their commander acknowledged the value of human thinking so openly. The small human from Earth had not only survived among them, but had also earned their respect. Ethan smiled faintly. "I only did what I could. The Krylonians are strong and fearless. I learned from you as much as you learned from me." Lyra allowed herself a small, rare smile. "Perhaps together, we are stronger than either of us alone." The day passed with joint training sessions. Ethan demonstrated strategies for anticipating enemy movements, setting up defenses, and using the environment to their advantage. The Krylonians, initially skeptical, began to see the value in his methods. Cadets who had doubted him before now followed his instructions without hesitation. Lyra watched as Ethan guided the cadets through a complex simulation, combining human strategy with Krylonian might. The cadets moved smoothly, covering each other's weaknesses, anticipating attacks, and using clever traps. Where before they had relied on sheer power, they now relied on teamwork and intelligence, a combination that made them nearly unstoppable. After the training, Lyra and Ethan walked to the cliffs overlooking the colony. The sky was painted with the colors of the setting sun, and the wind carried a soft, calming sound across the mountains. "You have changed how we see humans," Lyra said, her voice quiet. "Many of us thought your kind could not survive here, could not match our strength. But you have shown that survival is not only about power, It is about heart, mind, and resilience. Ethan looked at her, thoughtful. That is what Earth teaches. We do not always have strength, but we survive by thinking, by adapting, and by helping each other. Strength is different for every species, but it is always valuable. Lyra nodded. I see that now, and I want others to see it too. You will continue training the cadets, combining our techniques with your strategies. The colony will be stronger than ever because of it. Ethan inclined his head. I would be honored to help. Together we can prepare the cadets for anything the galaxy throws at them. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to imagine the possibilities. Humans and Krylonians, working together, could overcome threats that neither could face alone. She had spent her life believing that strength was only physical, that the strongest and fastest warriors always prevailed. But Ethan had proven her wrong. Strength could come from strategy, intelligence, resilience, and courage. The cadets joined them at the cliff, eager to learn more. Lyra introduced Ethan as a teacher and strategist, explaining how his human perspective had saved lives and turned the tide of battle. The cadets listened carefully, absorbing every word, their admiration for the small human growing with each story. As the night fell and the twin moons rose over Krylon, Ethan and Lyra stood side by side, watching the lights of the colony below. The battles had been won, but the lessons would last far longer. Humans were no longer underestimated. They had earned respect, not through brute strength, but through courage, intelligence, and perseverance. You have done more than survive, Lyra said softly. You have changed the way we see the galaxy and the way we see ourselves. Ethan smiled. I only did what I had to do, but I am glad to see that humans are no longer overlooked. There is much we can achieve together. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, a rare gesture of acknowledgement and trust. Yes, and together we will face the challenges ahead. The galaxy is vast, full of dangers and full of opportunities, and humans, small as they may seem, will no longer be ignored. The cadets watched, inspired. They had trained for years to become strong, but they had learned a greater lesson. Strength was not only physical, it was also resilience, courage, and the ability to think under pressure. Humans, once underestimated, had proven their worth. Later, in the quiet of the camp, Ethan sat beneath the stars, reflecting on his journey. He had left Earth seeking adventure, knowing the galaxy was bigger and stranger than anything he had imagined. He had faced predators, fought duels, and guided warriors stronger than himself, and yet he had survived. He had learned, adapted, and earned respect. Lyra approached him again, her expression softer than before. You have done well, human. I misjudged you, and I am glad to admit it. Your kind has shown us that strength comes in many forms. You have my respect and my trust. Ethan looked up at her. Thank you, Lyra. That means a great deal. I hope that humans and Krylonians can continue to learn from each other. Together we are stronger than we could ever be alone. Lyra nodded. Yes. Together we will face the future, and nothing will stop us. The next day, the cadets trained harder than ever, blending Krylonian power with human strategy. Ethan continued to teach, guiding them with patience and intelligence. The colony became stronger, safer, and more united than ever, and as the stars twinkled above Krylon, a small human from Earth stood among the proud Krylonians, no longer underestimated, no longer seen as weak. He had proven that humans could survive, adapt, and thrive, even in a galaxy full of strength, danger, and the unknown. Lyra watched him, a quiet smile on her lips. I thought he was weak, but now I know. He is from Earth, and Earth produces strength the galaxy cannot ignore. Ethan looked at the horizon, thinking of Earth. the distant planet he called home, and the adventures that awaited him across the stars. He knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but he was ready. The galaxy was vast, and humans were small. But as Lyra had learned, strength was never measured by size alone. Courage, intelligence, and resilience could match or even surpass the greatest power in the universe. And together, humans and Krylonians would face the stars, stronger than ever, united against any threat, ready to write a new chapter in the galaxy's history. The story of a small human from Earth, once underestimated, had reached the hearts of warriors stronger than anyone had imagined. And this was only the beginning. The twin moons shone brightly over Krylon, illuminating a future filled with possibility, respect, and the promise of adventures yet to come.